Sometimes when you bet on yourself, you win. Sometimes when you bet on yourself, you lose. And sometimes if you listen to the wrong people, they'll cause you to bet on yourself when you shouldn't. And this is the Pete Alonso problem. I think this is probably something that has happened to a lot of players over the years, but they haven't been as high profile players. And so look, I'm a firm believer that you need to be betting on yourself. That's a big part of life, is you've got to say, look, this is something I can do. But just understand that sometimes those bets on yourself simply don't work out, and you have to make the best of it. The worst thing that you can do is when you bet on yourself and lose is to double down on that bet. And I think this is, again, the problem that Pete Alonso faces is he bet on himself, which is fine. Juan Soto bet on himself, and it paid off greatly for him. Plenty of players bet on themselves every year. That's why they want to sign short-term deals with high AAVs so they can lock up those big long-term contracts. But you know what? There are plenty of players who bet on themselves, and the bet just simply doesn't work out. There are hundreds of baseball players in the minor leagues who are betting on themselves who will never crack the majors. That doesn't mean they should quit. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't bet on themselves. It just simply means that there certainly comes a point in time for everyone where you have to make the decision, am I going to double down or am I just going to cut my losses where I'm at? And I think the Pete Alonso problem is he's got the wrong voice in his ear for what he needs right now. You know who he needs in his ear right now? Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo needs to be in his ear. David Wright needs to be in his ear. People who have done what he has the opportunity to do but has failed to do so, which is to figure out exactly what a realistic market looks like. And I get it. From my perspective, from your perspective, we say, what's the difference, between 20 million or 25 million a year? And we can't see clearly. We don't have the same business mind, because the truth is the difference between those numbers is a significant percentage income raise. And you might say, well, yeah, but it's so much more. But understand, this isn't our job to judge whether or not Pete Alonso should be worth X or Y. It's simply our job as fans to step back and say, look, based on what the market is, this is clear that you are in a situation, Pete, where you have been told that your value is different than what the actual market is telling you. And it's no different than for, say, me or you trying to say, well, I bought this stock at $10 and I really want to sell it for $25. But if the market for that stock is $8, that's what the market is. You can try to trick someone into buying it, but the reality is the market is the market. And you have to remember that all of these owners, all these executives need to make sure that they're not hurting themselves in the long run. Why would someone want to set Pete up with a contract that goes above his market value? Because that's only going to hurt you in the future. You need to make sure that as a business, you're making things. Now, again, we're dealing with millions of dollars, which me and probably you can't necessarily comprehend the amount of money, but just get rid of the zeros and everything makes a whole lot more sense. If you say, hey, I'm willing to do this job or I'm willing to sell this item for $25 and the person comes and says, well, I'm only going to pay you $15 for it, you can keep asking for the $25, but if the market doesn't provide for it, that's all that really matters. And so I wish and I hope for Pete that he can get some voices speaking into him and that he can hear some voices that will be, look, there are so many opportunities that you have being in New York that go above and beyond just simply the contract that you sign. Your personal brand, your legacy, all these things matter. And I already hit on this in one video, but it just feels like I wish I could just speak to him and just say, Pete, listen, I understand you believe that you're worth more, but if you believe that and you're going to double down on it, then double down on it with a short-term contract with some opt-outs, even if it's less than you want this year, and then go out and prove everyone wrong. And if you don't, then, well, at least you have a solid contract that's equal or maybe even slightly more than what you're actually going to be worth. And if you truly believe you're not on the decline, then go take something. Humble yourself for a year, take something and prove the doubters wrong. There are more than one way to double down on yourself. One is to double down on and being stubborn, which is kind of what it appears that Pete Alonso and Scott Boras are doing. The other side is you can double down on your ability and say, okay, you know what? Fair enough. I had a down year. I believe I'm worth more, but I also need to prove to you that I'm not going downhill. And let your bat do the talking. Let your work do the talking. I get it. It's not what you want, but you're about to set yourself up for something so much worse than what you could still have today. And I would make that encouragement to Pete as well as anyone else that's in this type of similar situation, any other players. Like, you can double down on yourself and being stubborn with what you think, or you can double down on your skills and abilities and let that do the talking.